Okay, let me repeat it again. Oh, here goes the 11 o'clock hour here. Anyway, what I wanted to do next, so as not to bore some of you non-computer people, was to read some of my starts to some short stories that I've been thinking about attempting to actually follow through with. None of these really have names, they just have ideas. So, without further ado, for years we have thought the Earth and its inhabitants were the only intelligent life in the universe. However, we searched the heavens for other life in vain. We created organizations such as SETI and sent messages into space, all in hopes to hear a response. None ever came. We failed to realize that we only understood a fraction of what our own world had to offer. While we have ventured through most of the land masses on this planet, we have yet to have mapped the oceans or cataloged the creatures in the seas. How much more do we not know exist while we live our lives in ignorance of the dangers of our own little world? Recently, we have discovered bacteria and germs. These microscopic organisms growing and multiplying at exponential rates. They mutate, evolve, grow, and manipulate their environments to survive. Until the invention of the microscope in the 1600s by Antony van Leeuwenhoek, we didn't know these organisms even existed. What technology of tomorrow will allow us to discover new and exciting living creatures that we never thought possible? That's one idea. Let's see. Next one I started to say. More of a jungle theme. Slicing through the jungle, Jim used his machete to cut through the vines and foliage in front of him. This was week 3 in expedition to find the ruins and temple of the great Arachanian emperor Sim-Hop-Tim. I can't even read my own writing. Jim had an expedition of 4 local Indian laborers and the infamous Professor Edmondson with him. He'd been paid heavily for this trip despite his objections. The last time Jim had to enter this god-forsaken land, he'd contracted yellow fever, and it took many years before he was well enough to adventure again. However, Professor Edmondson had been very persuasive. After this last expedition, Jim could finally retire for good. It was something that Jim had wanted to do for a long time. Sound interesting? If you think so, dial 2. Here's a somewhat longer one I started. The fan rotated, slicing through the air like a hot knife cuts through butter. The fan, moving the air and cooling the room. Nick sat at a table directly below the fan. There was nothing else around him except for the blank walls staring without expression, mocking him with their silence. A door was locked, leaving him nowhere to go. Time seemed endless. How long were they going to keep him in this forgotten state? Suddenly, from nowhere, a voice rang out. "Nicholas Trout? That is your name, correct?" "Yes," replied Nick hesitantly. The voice rang out again, thundering in Nick's head. "Do you know why you are here?" No. I don't remember anything after leaving work today," Nick stated, slightly scared. Everything was a blur for Nick. He remembered going to work. He remembered a boring day sitting at his desk counting the minutes till it was quitting time. What happened to me? Why don't I remember? Nick thought to himself. He closed his eyes and thought about his day. Nothing exceptional happened. He had arrived at work just in time to miss being scolded about arriving 5 minutes late again. Why he never thought to leave home 5 minutes earlier never occurred to him. It's autopilot in the morning. You know the routine. You get up, take a shower, dress, groom and brush your teeth. Then you run out the door with just enough time to get to work. At work, Nick sat at his desk and looked at the monitor, staring him blankly in the face. He hit Control-Alt-Delete to log in and entered his credentials. He screamed at the fact that he had to reset his password again. It seemed as if he had only done this just not so long ago. What was that I changed that to, he thought to himself. Cringing, he typed out 10 characters. Then remembering, he backspaced a few characters to replace the letter with a number. How clever was that? As if no one else ever thought of replacing I's with ones, O's with zeros, Nick thought. Just as his system began to log him in, Charlie came up around the corner with a cup of coffee in his hand. I saw you missed old Ms. Turnip this morning. You got lucky. What's that, 3 straight days late? He said, a smile ruefully across his face. I just can't get motivated in the morning. You know how it is, Nick stated with a yawn. You know how much fun this place is. At least it pays the bills, Nick said. My life is so dull, and this job doesn't help matters. Yeah, I hear ya, but watch it. You never know when they'll start docking you those 5 minutes every morning, Charlie stated with a diminished whisper. Well, I better get back to work. I wouldn't want old Turnip to catch me on break before my scheduled siesta. Charlie slipped back around the corner to his desk and began clicking away at his keyboard. Nick looked back at his monitor and clicked his email button. I wonder what new has happened today, he thought to himself, other than the usual boring company agenda emails. There was nothing of interest to read. Just then his intercompany IM garbled, and Ms. Turnip was reminding him that his report on his last project was due on her desk by the end of the morning. There was nothing new to report, Nick sighed and decided he'd better get that report completed. That sounds more like my reality than my imagination on that one, eh? Here's one that I thought about starting in regards to the fact that I like old-time radio so much. Problem is, I didn't grow up during that time, but I find it a very fascinating subject. In the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I can only imagine what it was like when entertainment meant sitting in front of a radio, waiting for the next episode of The Lone Ranger, The Shadow, or Buck Rogers. The great Gildersleeve still makes me laugh. But alas, I didn't grow up in that magical era of radio. I'm only able to listen to them through the recreations of the MP3s that I've collected throughout the years. But it's a nostalgia that I enjoy every day. Most nights, I put myself to sleep with the Gildersleeve, or Burns and Allen, Escape. Those are some of my favorites. I've always enjoyed old-time radio shows. I remember as a small child... Okay, not a small child. I remember as a young teenager, overseas in Germany where my father was stationed, and I remember turning on AFN, Armed Forces Network, or AFRC, Armed Forces Radio. And I remember about 17 or so, that I'd turn that on, and there'd be Paul Harvey doing his little good day. I don't do it. Please, don't make fun of me. But then I remember at 10:30 there was always a radio show on. Whether it was Johnny Dollar, the insurance investigator with the action-packed expense account. Escape to your imagination as they send you off into another world of exciting high adventure. There were a few others that I don't recall off the top of my head. But that's what got me started in old-time radio. I love the whole idea of old-time radio and listening to it, going back into that nostalgic era. It's just amazing. You know, And it's truly a change on a social commentary of how people were back then. And there's an episode of The Great Gildersleeve that I listened to that took place a week or two after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And it's a very moving piece. You know, unlike what we do now as Americans, condemning our government for everything that they've done to help protect our freedoms. 50 years ago, they knew what it meant to sacrifice. They knew what it meant to help protect other people's freedoms. Back then, I think they truly understood what being an American was and having the freedoms that we have today, that so many people nowadays, in my opinion, take for granted. And I won't go further on because I can get on political stuff and I don't want to. I just want to keep this lighthearted. I don't want my channel to turn into that. So enough of that. Let me move on to the next short story idea. This is just some rambling that I had done. I want to write a great story. However, whenever I start to write anything, I get brain cramps. There must be something out there to assist me with writing something decent that my readers would enjoy. When I used to write things in the past, my hands would take over. People used to ask me what it was I was writing about, and I used to tell them that I didn't know until the story was completed. My characters seemed to take over my fingers and come alive. Has my brain been eaten away by too much drinking? I never really drank that much, but I am a connoisseur of different styles of beer. I always enjoyed the taste, the texture, the hop styles, and so forth. I even brew beer, but I haven't done that very much lately, since my blood pressure problems. I can't get my blood pressure under control. Maybe it's the lack of blood to my brain. Anyway, short ramble. Next. And the last. This one actually gave a title, The Visitor. Who knows what it might be about? Only about 3 or 4 lines. That's what it's about. The stars shone so bright from the night sky. Marco looked up in wild amazement as the falling star fell from the heavens. Shining brightly, the object fell just out of sight. Wow, that looks like it could have crashed over the hill, Marco thought to himself. And that's as far as I got. Now, what do you know about all that? So many ideas are brewing in my head, and not one I can think of to continue on with. It really is true. As a young person, I would sit in front of my computer. Of course, I had a lot fewer distractions. And I'd just start to type. And it's amazing. I wish I could find more of the literature that I had. But unfortunately, it's either lost or somewhere in storage in Colorado. But it's amazing the things that came out. You know, I might have mentioned once or twice that the journals that I used to write, I would throw them out. 5,000 words, 7,000 words in weekends, in a night or two. I would just sit down, start writing, and my fingers would come alive. Characters would start doing things. Love stories would turn into adventures. Adventures into horror. Who knows what it would happen. I never knew what my story was going to do. I never knew how it was going to evolve. I just take a subject, any subject, a line, anything, jump right into it. And the most magical of imagination and everything would just appear and start up. And I'd like to know where that went. Now I sit at my laptop, rattle off a few lines, and don't know where to go. But that's for another day, because this is long enough. Well, I better let you go. It's getting late. As you heard, 11th hour has rung. I should be getting to bed so I can get to work tomorrow. So until next time, choose auf Wiedersehen, arrivederci. Good evening, good night, good morning, whatever you're having, have it. Enjoy it. Thank you all for subscribing. Thank you all for watching. I hope that I can find something entertaining for you to watch. I hope you all enjoy what you do watch. Thank you very much. Bye.